Hey everybody, Misty Williams with the Creative Entrepreneur Radio Show here. I'm so excited to introduce you guys to Nancy VanReece out of Nashville, Tennessee today. Nancy is an amazing communication strategist and social media expert who has been really developing her career over, 20 plus years, starting out in the music industry and working her way into doing some pretty awesome things in the arts and with all sorts of local businesses there in Nashville. She's a great example of someone who considers themselves a solopreneur, and she's leveraged her expertise into her own brand really before it was something that people did. She's very, very savvy on the communication front and has been very intentional about the way in which she's built her profile and established her career locally here in Nashville, Tennessee. And like a lot of leaders, building her network locally has embedded her into the community and given her a passion for being a good citizen and using her influence and contacts to really elevate the community that she lives in with her partner there in Nashville. And in fact, Nancy is running for office this year at the local level, and she's going to tell us a little bit about that. There's a real richness to her story, and I feel so inspired by her. She's a fellow Okie, just like I am, and from the moment I met her, I knew that she was a special kind of trailblazer. So I'm excited for you guys to meet her today. Thanks for joining us for the Creative Entrepreneur Radio Show.
Welcome to Creative Entrepreneur Radio. We're going backstage to explore the lives, lifestyles, and growth strategies mastered by seasoned entrepreneurs around the world. Entrepreneurs are gladiators. Are you one of us? If you're a first-time listener, welcome. Feel free to add the podcast to your favorite RSS feed or iTunes and check out our show notes at creativeentrepreneurradio.com. Up now, host and founder of MarketechU.com, Misty Williams.
Welcome, everyone, to the Creative Entrepreneur All Access podcast. I'm your host, Misty Williams, and I'm really excited about our guest entrepreneur today. Nancy VanReece is the owner of Carpe Diem Management, where she helps small businesses and nonprofits understand and use social media to reach, build, and lead core audiences. With a keen eye to the latest trends in social media and online communications, she has provided detailed social media and social communication strategies for many businesses around the United States. Nancy grew up in Oklahoma and has been an active member of the Nashville community for nearly 30 years, spending more than 25 years in the music business. She served as the executive director of the Nashville Shakespeare Festival, senior director of partnership development at Cool People Care, and as a strategist for GivingMatters.com, the Nashville Symphony, and the Nashville Library Foundation. Nancy is an engaging and regular speaker on issues such as online marketing, social media communications, branding, storytelling, and living an artful life. Welcome to the podcast, Nancy.
Thanks for having me, Misty. It's good to talk to a fellow Okie.
Yes, a fellow Okie. Well, I'm really excited to be kicking off the Creative Entrepreneur All Access podcast with you because there's so many things about your story that just fit perfectly into the vision that I have for these dialogues, and I'm just excited to dig in. So
fun, good.
So you kind of represent to me, and my point of view, like the quintessential Nashville entrepreneur, which to me means that you had some kind of experience in the music business, and you've worn a whole lot of hats, and you have these creative streaks that really inform not only how you want to show up with your own brand and your own business, but it shows up in the work that you do for your clients that lend a completely different dimension to like the strategy work you do. I compare it, obviously now I can compare it to Austin because that's where I live. But, when I think about a lot of entrepreneurs that I know across the country, there's something really different about the Nashville entrepreneur. So I would love for you just to kind of talk about your foray into the entrepreneurial path. So you come to Nashville and like to have a career in the music industry, you kind of have to have that entrepreneurial streak if you're going to have any kind of longevity at all. So why don't you introduce us to like this journey for you?
Well, it was interesting because when I moved here out of college actually attended Baylor University in the early 80s. I just dated myself. When I moved to Nashville, it was to move the company to Nashville, and the company meaning the stuff that I was doing and calling it a company. And that entailed radio promotion, which was still vinyl and just moving into the CD realm for independent musicians, and marketing. And so I started with communications, promotions, and marketing using, traditional analog type communication strategies. And then moving that to Nashville, found out right away, it's what they say now, it's a 3-year town. And I think it was then as well. I mean, it takes a long time of give and take for the city to work well for you. And I think it's because it's the word collaboration is in the water here. Whether you come as a songwriter and need to co-write in order to get your teeth, working, or if you're a musician that's trying to form a band, coming as a solo artist never works. You have to collaborate, right? And then as a marketer, learning that all the different team members that you have to put together to successfully tell a story, it takes time because you have to meet people and formulate that story. And as a painter, because I paint part-time, and so as an artist, I've been consistently informed by kind of expanding my palette, if you will, always looking for ways to collaborate with individuals on projects so that win-win situations are created for the client.
Right.
But in a word, Nashville is collaboration.
Yeah, totally. That's one thing that I've noticed, for me, I moved to Nashville when I was, I think, 23 or 24 years old. And I don't really feel like, as an entrepreneur, even though a couple years in, I, was on my own, so to speak, I don't feel like I really was able to do the things that I wanted to do until probably 6, 7, 8 years in, because those relationships take so much time to cure, and for the opportunities to come out of them. So I applaud anyone that can make it a 3-year town even, because it just took me longer.
Yeah, but now everything's faster these days, Misty.
Yes.
But I tell you, the interesting thing is that I never even heard the word entrepreneur until, like the last 10 years. And I tell people, it's like, well, I had this marketing company and we had some people and we called stations and we got records played and we helped sell some product, and then we launched a record label, and then we sold the label and did some stuff with publishing, and they were like, oh, you're an entrepreneur. And I'm like, what's that?
Yeah.
All we did was our passion, and we didn't really stop to think about how we were building something in order to sell it, or that we were trying to create jobs. I mean, we just literally grunted it out, and when work was too much for one person, you hired another. And
right.
When that was, so I think that there was a bit of naivety that I was able to benefit from prior to the internet age.
Right.
That new folks coming up don't have that kind of innocence to be able to do it, but at the same time they have so much more available to them to really not have to fail quite as often in order to succeed. So,
right. One of the things that really strikes me about the entrepreneurial community in Nashville is I don't consider it to be a serious entrepreneurial community from the perspective of, it's not Silicon Valley, a lot of JV funding going and, startup crazy and all of that kind of stuff. Although there is some of that happening in the town, but it's almost like being an entrepreneur in Nashville is just it's an excuse or a way to do what you love and that makes you feel the most alive, Well,
and you can get kind of tied up in semantics, because I think more and more folks, because I don't call myself an entrepreneur. I mean, if you force me, I'll say solo. Right.
Right.
I'm a sole proprietor. I'm people contract me for services, and I have, no intention of growing a company or adding employees. I do what I do. And
right.
So I think that there are some new businesses that are learning the difference between being individual contractors and being able to do what they want to do at their own time, at their own pace, do it well enough to start charging more, every 5 years, that kind of thing. That doesn't make you an entrepreneur. I think, the folks in Nashville are kind of learning the differences between those things and honoring both in their own environment, because entrepreneurs need those team members to be able to hire to make things happen. I know that there is a whole lot of very serious entrepreneurship happening, through the Jumpstart Foundry, what's going on with the Entrepreneur Center, what's happening in healthcare and Health Start. And so I, although I'm not involved with it directly every day, I can tell you that Nashville is very serious about its venture capital growth and kind of funding and guiding new ventures. And this is a place to come and try to make those things happen. I have no doubt that that's going to continue to grow. But for me and for what I do through Carpe Diem Management, we simply are able to help with the branding, with the social strategy and the communication development for those entrepreneurial developments.
So one of the things about your story that is kind of intriguing to me, and it's something that I've seen actually in a lot of my colleagues in Nashville, is you've had this uncanny ability over the course of your career to keep reinventing yourself.
Yeah.
And to kind of evolve and flex and change as the landscape, the creative landscape and the business landscape has shifted so massively. And I'd love for you just to kind of talk about what that journey has been like for you, because as you know, in my own journey, I look at the ways that I've had to shift and change and evolve. And there's times that it's exhilarating, and there's times that it's really scary, and there's times that I feel overwhelmed and have wondered, is this the end of the road? Where does the road go from here? Like, what's that been like for you?
Well, I think that, I was raised by a man who was self-employed. My father is a retired oral surgeon. And I had the example growing up of someone who worked for themselves, but that took time to kind of have a life in addition to that. And I think that without me even realizing it, he instilled in me some ability to be able to kind of, I hate to use the word balance, but to have, because balance is not real, because you don't know, but some sort of way to be able to understand the importance of each day and what you do with it. And I think that kind of been, and with my artistic temperament, has kind of combined to serve me well as a true Renaissance woman. Because I think it's for some reason I'm okay with the feast and famine of sole proprietorship. I've been able to understand that there's always a season where things are going awesome, and then it usually follows the time where you have a little bit more time to make it awesome again.
Yeah, summer and winter, baby.
Right?
Summer and winter.
Exactly. And so there's really there's this old story about the robin and the worm. I don't know if you've ever heard it, but this idea that you see robins right around January, they're all over the yard, just pecking at the ground and kind of looking and pecking and looking and pecking. Just a whole yard full of robins around here. And I've learned that there's a big difference between kind of waiting and pecking and grabbing that worm. And I've never seen a robin actually dig a 10-foot hole looking for a worm. And so I've also not seen a robin sitting in a tree waiting for a worm to jump up and
Right.
So I've learned kind of from that scenario to where it's like, you've got to go out there and listen and peck and listen and peck, but don't get stuck and don't assume that someone's going to do the work for you either. And so those types of things have helped me. And also throughout of everything that I've done, whether it's just from contract negotiations with publishers and record companies, or working with long-term contracts with my work at BMI. I worked 9 years at Broadcast Music Incorporated doing corporate and healthcare music licensing. It was so sexy. But working with a client for three months to 3 years to get a yes out of someone, that types of salesmanship and communication work has served me long term to be able to understand that no matter what I'm doing, it's always about the story.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the story. And the tools in which we communicate that story and to what audience are the things of our craft. But if we can identify what the story is, then you can move through any kind of seasonal changes, whether financial or just in terms of business and business trends. I mean, just you can throw all of that out the window if you can identify a good story and tell it well.
Yeah, I would say that's one of the things that I would credit to your longevity and your ability to keep reinventing yourself is you really get communication. You understand the power of communication, the power of the story, the power of relationships, the importance of it. And then when all these new channels come along and new modes of doing business and way of doing business come along, you're able to flex, but the fundamentals really have been the same the last 30 years and longer,
Well, that's right, Missy. And I think that some of the training that I do now, I have 10 times a year, I hand select individuals that usually are 45 years or older, usually, that have been in a situation to where they suddenly have woken up and realized that a lot of the communication tools, particularly social media platforms and digital marketing tools, have kind of slid right by them, and they're a little scared about that and need to kind of get back to basics, but don't really want to tell anybody that they're getting help.
Right.
Right. So I've been working with individuals, whether they be public speakers or whether or not they are real estate agents or CEOs or CFOs or folks that are in senior levels of HR that are trying to figure this out. And in that training, I've learned that as a cuspy baby boomer, that I can communicate with them in a way that they feel comfortable by telling them these new ways to tell stories. And so taking classic marketing and communication techniques and then just using these tools can be a way for folks to learn how to embrace the technology and not be afraid of it.
Right. So let's talk about some social stuff because, in my experience in this space, social media is so misunderstood.
Yeah.
There's a lot of misconceptions about social media and what it can and can't do for you and how it works, Yeah. So I get asked all the time, should I be on Facebook or should I be on Twitter or should I be blogging, or as if there's these check boxes, you do these things and then you're doing social media marketing and it's going to make you successful, and it's definitely more complicated than that. And there's, I kind of take people through the paces of, well, what are your goals and what do you want to accomplish before we decide what channels you're going to be in. So I would love to kind of get your take on really putting together a great social strategy. Like, how do you find your work and your advising of clients showing up when it comes to social media?
Well, it's interesting. I think that it always starts with the audience with me. It's understanding that once you have clearly identified the goal, then you have to identify the audience. And we've been kind of conditioned to think in marketing terms. We think, okay, audience, male, female, age groups, socioeconomic status, race, sex. What are they as identifiers of groups of people that we market to? Whereas on social, I've learned that audience identification is actually different. You can identify audiences as strangers to your brand, have no clue you exist, and really don't care, right? Those are strangers. Friends are those that know you exist. These are friends in a Facebook sort of way. So We're not talking about friends that will change your tire if you're stuck, right? These are not real friends. These are friends. Friends are folks that know that you exist but haven't really engaged with you at all. There are customers, someone who's actually given you money at least once, and you know who those people are. You've been able to identify them either through an email list or through a point of sale contact, if it's retail, or some sort of way that you know that they are customers, and you have this bucket of people that you know are your customers. And then you have loyal customers. Somebody's done this more than once. They've actually started engaging with your brand more than one time, or they visit you once a week. Those are loyal customers. And then you have your advocates. Those are people that are talking about you while they're in line at the grocery store. They're so excited, right? They're just like, they are wearing your T-shirt and off they go. These are all different audience types that you can actually communicate to on social media in different ways. And all those previous types and versions of audiences that we normally do are all inside each of those audience groups, right? You can have a stranger that's an old woman and that lives in a shoe, and the same stranger is a young beatnik that likes to skateboard. Who are these audiences? And if we can identify them, then we understand that our social media messages are different to each of them. You don't send something or provide some content to a total stranger in the same way that you would somebody that is a loyal customer. So understanding those audience types can be really helpful whenever you're starting to develop a strategy.
So what's the launching off point? So you've profiled your audiences, and, kind of, how do you take someone through that messaging process,
Well, it's always going to be different because, if you're talking about a consumable brand, or if you're talking about a nonprofit, or if you're talking about someone who is selling a service, all of those things kind of inform the types of content that you may need to begin creating. But understanding that it's a communication strategy, and that if you're trying to communicate with those individuals where they are gathered at the time that they are ready to listen to your message, then that's how you start forming your strategy. Mm-hmm. So if you find out that, for example, that the people that you're trying to reach are more than likely going to be, based on research and studies that I do, you can find out that your audience is more than likely going to more than likely be available to you early morning, midweek, as opposed to Friday nights or Saturday nights. Then you know that that's when your content needs to be. And then you can start identifying original content versus shared content and developing some sort of content strategy around that informed information.
So one of the things that stands out to me about my introduction to you and your work is actually hearing people raving about the Nashville Symphony social strategy. Yeah. And then meeting you and having a lovely dinner with you over at our friend Michael Hart's, and finding out later that you were really instrumental and, in large part responsible for the social strategy that the symphony had implemented. And I know that there's a lot of people in Nashville that have some great things to say. And outside of Nashville, you've got a great quote on your website from New Yorker magazine and what they said about the social strategy. So it would be really fun, I think, to hear just some highlights of what you did for the Nashville Symphony, like the goals of that strategy and some key things that you did that really helped you to get traction in the social space.
Well, I actually started working with the Nashville Symphony through a grant program from the Tennessee Arts Commission and Cool People Care, and was given 12 weeks to work with them on a project through my company. And we really enjoyed doing that together. And up to almost a year later, they had decided that they were going to make some changes and actually include on their staff a social media strategist that could also help with their website. And I joined their staff for about a year and a half, a little over a year and a half, I was there in addition to the work I was doing with Carpe Diem. So that was kind of fun because I was working full time and still running the company, which is a total Nashville thing to do.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. But a lot of people just thought that the symphony was one of my clients because I worked so well. Yeah. Yes. And I also had an office in the Symphony Center. But the first thing that I did when I got to the Nashville Symphony was talk to them about a separate social media mission statement. And if I remember it correctly, it was that our mission was to engage people around authentic experiences in any way that they choose. The idea of creating experience that was worth sharing, and creating positive experiences worth sharing, because negative ones are also fun to share. But creating positive experiences worth sharing became something that we concentrated on. And the work I did through the communications department, I also had great colleague that worked with me that was instrumental in keeping some of my sanity. Lori Davis worked with me at the same time. We were there at the same time together. And using a lot of the tools that we had available to us at the symphony to be able to kind of tell the story, not only for the symphony hall, but also for the musicians. I was working with them prior to their Carnegie Hall trip, and we did a Road to Carnegie blog. And it was that blog that garnered the praise of the New Yorker magazine and some of the work that we did. When I first got to the symphony, based on the research, we were engaging about 20 to 30 people in conversation on some social media platform a week. And when I left, it was well over 500 a week on 13 different platforms that we were consistently engaged with, from our education work to our concerts to the work that we were doing with the musicians themselves. So garnering a lot of that success, when they went through some troubles with the hall, I was most proud of the fact that the engagement that we had, particularly on Twitter, was all positive because of the work that we had done, the year before that, to be able to communicate with the audience. Different symphonies like the Jacksonville Symphony and another one in California mentioned our social media strategy as something that all orchestras should pay attention to, because it was a matter of audience engagement. Mm-hmm. And it's a lot of fun with the arts or with an organization that has concerts, right? It's like, that's fun to talk about. Who's not going to talk about, Brandy Carlisle's tour bus or, Willie Nelson? I mean, who's all in 1 week with some classical musician coming in all in 1 week? That's like candy, right? It's plenty of content. But if you have to turn around and say, okay, what if my brand is a company that makes paint thinner? I mean, how do I make that work? So although I really enjoyed the community engagement and, helping the Nashville Symphony become an organization that was a welcoming place for all of Nashvillians to participate in, taking those kinds of social media strategies in an entertainment environment and applying them to real estate or to retail or to healthcare apps is something that is a little bit more cumbersome.
Right.
And so I've enjoyed the challenge of making that jump. But after 6 years in the nonprofit arts sector, both with the Shakespeare Festival and with the Nashville Symphony, it was time to kind of go back to business and expand some of the work that I was doing outside of the arts.
Right. So one of the things for me about being an entrepreneur that I really love is actually not the work itself necessarily, but it's like this lifestyle that I'm able to create for myself because, I have a different way of showing up professionally and making a living.
Yeah.
So when I think about some of the things I love most about being an entrepreneur, it's not even the work itself, even though I totally love my work. But it's all these other things that I've been able to entertain and ways I've been able to develop myself and passions that I've been able to nurture, So I'd love to hear from you, like 1 or 2 or 3 things about your lifestyle that exist because of this unique entrepreneurial path that you're on. Like what are you passionate about and what juices you, and what are you able to explore, and what have you been introduced to because your professional life is a little unconventional?
Well, that's a fascinating question. Well, it's like, right now I'm sitting in a 300 square foot room adjacent to my home that is both my art studio and my workspace for Carpe Diem. And being able to work from home is delightful,
right.
Being able to do that. But at the same time, working outside of the home, being able to be, if you will, anywhere and still get it done is probably one of the best things about it, right? All I have to do is, if I have my iPhone and my laptop, I can work literally from anywhere if there's good Wi-Fi.
Right.
And so whether it's at a coffee house near you or at the park on a pretty day, or on my deck or in my art studio, having that ability to kind of be mobile or immobile, depending on, is always been enjoyable to me. And I know that there are some people that it's like they're kind of scared of that because it's like, I don't know if I can motivate myself enough to do that. It's like, well, then you should probably get a job to where you have to show up at a
right.
That's it's not something.
Not eating is good motivation.
Yeah. Here's the thing, right? So I enjoy that, but it's a plus and a challenge simultaneously, and I think that's very typical of that entrepreneurial kind of danger streak, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we have. We used to joke that it's like, hey, if you work for yourself, you only have to work half days, and then you pause and say 12 hours. So it really, there are some days where you can go, I just gonna have to binge on Netflix today, catch you guys later. You can do that, but it also, that by doing that, the next 3 days you're gonna have to work double time.
Right.
And so with freedom comes a great responsibility. It's like when you mentioned at the beginning all the different hats that I wear, I wanted to say, and a cape.
And a cape, that's right.
Because you really do have to kind of shuffle things along. I used to call it plate spinning, but now I call it soup stirring because it's a little less hectic and a little bit better of a description, because there are soups that are that you got to bring to a boil before they're any good.
Yeah.
There's some that have to simmer and you have to nurse them and add some salt every once in a while. And they are different, and clients are like that. There are some clients where you're just going to have to nurture them every day in order for some success to see. And then there's others where I can put them on simmer and they're going to be fine if I leave it alone. So there are opportunities that having that mixture of different clients. I mean, in any given week, I may be working on a healthcare project, a real estate project, a nonprofit project, a retail project, or a new app launch. And they're all none of those are at all the same or have any similar stories. But in a 4-hour segment of my day, I may have something to do with all of that.
Right.
And so I enjoy having all of that variety. So that's one of the things I like about it. So I don't know what else.
Well, a couple of things really stand out to me about your, kind of the way that you've built your life. Really, you are able to do some art yourself, and kind of weave it into how you're showing up professionally, which is really fun. And you also have this passion project around the farmers market and politics, and you have so many different civic faces of how you're able to show up. And it all kind of works because you're under the umbrella of your own brand. Whereas if you were, an employee of the symphony, for example, I'm not sure that you would quite be able to show up and juggle it all the same way.
Well, I think that all of us in some way, whether, if we have a 9-to-5 job and we love it, we still find those other things that inform what it is that makes us unique individuals. And I really love taking pictures with my iPhone. I got the new iPhone 6 and enjoying all the gadgets that has on it, and shooting video and taking photographs and doodling watercolors that can later be used for presentations or for workshops or for backgrounds on client projects is all part of the joy for me as well. It's like right now I'm looking at my computer screen. I have this awesome photograph of all these Amish apples from the farmer's market, and I'm thinking, how can I use that? And so I'm able to kind of inform some of my artistic bent in that regard. And I used to be a little frustrated by clients that just, and I just say, well, just take a picture of it. It's like, and they would send me the picture and it was just this horrible thing.
Right.
What's your problem? Do you think about foreground and shadow and where the lights come? It's like, they don't get that. So now I'm not frustrated by it anymore. It's just called job security.
Yes.
But I've learned that taking the things that you love and incorporating them into all of what you're able to do can make you a much happier person. Mm-hmm. And so, in doing some of that, particularly in the last couple years, has been really enjoyable. You mentioned that I'm actually a volunteer at a local community-run, producer-only farmers market, and we just completed our first year, and we'll do it again next year here in Nashville. It's in a little suburb called Madison, Tennessee, at an old train station that Johnny Cash saved called Amqui Station. And so every Sunday afternoon, I'm hanging out doing farmers market stuff, but everyone knows about every 15 minutes I'm putting a picture up on Instagram. Mm-hmm. So even when you're not working, you're kind of working, So informing lifestyle and storytelling into all that you do can just make you better at other things. So,
mm-hmm. So what's coming up? Next 6 to 12 months? What's coming up for Nancy? What's coming up for Carpe Diem?
Well, now that you've asked, I'm making a run for a Metro Council again, for Nashville Metro Council, and that election is in next August. And so for the next 8 months through July, about a third of my time will be spent as candidate, Nancy.
Wow.
Oh, I know. It's exciting.
Yes.
Yeah, we are very optimistic, and it has to do really with that community involvement and building the Northeast Corridor, Davidson County, up for small business and affordable housing. And honestly, Misty, that type of city council gig, they call it a part-time gig. They pay you $15,000 a year. It's like, it's not, you don't do it because of the money. It's just something that you do out of civic service.
Right.
It's about potholes and sidewalks and zoning, but it's also about storytelling. And I think that being able, as a communications person, to be able to tell the story of the importance of the Northeast Corridor of the county, I think is going to be very much informed in my campaign. So that's going to be a lot of my time. And then I collaborate with an agency called Parachute Media, and blog for them and do project management and social strategy development for their clients. And we will share at least 5 clients together. And so those, and then a couple that I have in addition to that through Carpe Diem will keep all my soups hot.
Right.
So
that's something that I think you do particularly well, being a, sole proprietor and running your own thing. Like, you also leverage partnership and strategic relationships really well. You know, you're definitely not an island unto yourself, and I think that has given you a lot of unique opportunities in your career.
Well, and again, it leads us full circle back to that word collaboration, because without having the ability to build a team that is the best team that your client needs, then they might, the kind of clients that I'm getting nowadays, I mean, they can go to these big public relations firms and they'll have a long list of stuff that they're going to do for them, and they pay them this giant retainer every month, and they kind of do it, but they don't embed themselves, right? They don't really, they're just another client. And instead of that, I'm able to, for my clients to say, let's act as though we are actually part of your team, not just an agency for you. Mm-hmm. So by going in and understanding the story, by developing the content for them, by establishing a strategy for that content, and then having an agency that specializes in direct marketing to target audiences and lookalike audiences on platforms like Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, and can do the online advertising. And then another specialist that actually is our SEO specialist, they can come to Carpe Diem and end up having 3 companies and 10 people all working for them for one retainer. So those are the kinds of things that I'm really excited about kind of fleshing out.
So tell us.
Your dog?
Yes, that's my dog. They're making a special appearance on the first podcast.
No, I think it's awesome. We just lost our dog Scout after nearly 15 years, and it's been very sad. So I celebrate any dog bark.
Right. And they're intrusive barking. So tell us how we can get a hold of you. If people wanted to connect with you on social media, if they wanted to talk to you about collaborating around a project, how would people get a hold of you?
Well, it's I've tried to keep it pretty consistent. There's all kinds of ways that will lead you to the same door, but the fastest way is just simply the @ Nancy VanReece, and that's VanReece, not S. I'm not a peanut butter cup.
Right.
But @ Nancy VanReece or nancyvanreece.com will take you to the website, and all the goodies are there, and links to Parachute Media are there as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Nancy. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Thanks, Misty. I appreciate it. It's an honor to be a guest.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening to Creative Entrepreneur Radio. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review on iTunes. That helps others find our show. You can find links, contact information, and a recap of today's episode in the show notes found at creativeentrepreneurradio.com. Tweet Tell Misty, TELLMISTY, with your thoughts, ideas, or questions, and join the conversation on our Facebook group. You can learn more about Misty and her work over at marketechyou.com. See you next time.